Hi everybody, it's Ian Fox here from Guest Safety Officer Lobby Group. The aim and purpose of the Lobby Group, of course, is to help protect people, and the best way to do that is so that you know what you're doing. And of course me, which would be Andy. We're joined today by an unbelievable guest, and we've got Gary here as well. Can't do anything about that. But we've got a proper world class guest for you today that hopefully wherever you are, whatever your responsibilities in an organisation are, that you can take something away from this. I know that I've looked at some of the work that this man's done, and it's brilliant. All right. I'm going to bring the guests in right now. And here we have, in the top left, as you're looking at it, we've got Gary. And at the bottom, on the screen, sharing his wisdom, the world famous superstar guest himself, Professor Keith Still. Yeah. Professor of Crowd Dynamics?
Crowd science at the University of
Crowd.
Suffolk.
So, right, so what I'm going to do first of all is just ask if we could all just very briefly introduce ourselves, and then we'll crack on with the stream and its purpose. Gary.
Good morning, and thank you for the intro. Appreciate that. Just Gary. As previously before, 36 years, 37 years now in the industry. And I've cracked on the floor about saying what I've done and how I've done it. So I've probably done it all. So that's me in a nutshell.
Keith?
Visiting professor of crowd science at University of Suffolk. I have studied crowd disasters around the world for the last 33, 34 years now. Specializing in expert witness cases, consultancy, and teaching and training how to make the world a safer place.
Right. Well, my name's Ian Fox. As I've said before, I'm the chap who's founded Guest Safety Officer Lobby Group for the purpose of improving the professional appreciation of the work that first responders, which are inevitably those working in the events and security industry when these things go wrong. As you'll know out there, people, there has been a series of incidents as of late. Indeed, I think there was one at New Year's Eve that's gone viral on TikTok. Is that right, Gary?
That's correct. Yeah, it was what you see on it is basically the crowds breaching the steel shield and rushing down towards the embankment for the fireworks that night. You can't see what's actually happening on externally, but the video shows internally. Literally, the gates opened and literally the crowd just surging through, and the police attempting to stop it, but generally everyone just let them go through.
It's a very interesting situation. Keith, I want to sort of, and obviously I'm well aware that we cannot discuss the specifics of any particular case. So I'm going to hopefully rely on you to make sure that we don't get sued. It wouldn't be good, you know.
Not right. For the first talk of the year, anyway.
Right.
Okay, I mean, we saw it Sydney, we saw it Melbourne, similar sort of incidents where crowds are, once they've come out of the COVID lockdown, we're seeing three different emergent behaviours. The COVID cautious, the people that are just avoiding crowds, and they're not so much of a problem. The contentious, the people that are becoming argumentative in crowded spaces because of rule imposition. And the exuberant, the people that have just got a forgotten behaviour, who for 2, 3 years have been in lockdown, they're suddenly coming back to events and all of the teaching and training and understanding of crowds seems to have just lapsed. Now, that will quickly renormalize. But until it
Keith,
happens, we're seeing not only a loss of the skill set within the crowd management sector. I think Plaza We Make Events wrote a report earlier this year saying there was some 60 to 70% of the skills lost to the industry. But crowds coming back with an exuberant nature and just, A, a youthful crowd who have never been to major events before, and B, crowds that are just forgotten how to behave and are getting just over enthusiastic, which of course are significant challenges to crowd management teams. And with a subsequent loss in various skill sets, these two factors are pulling together, and unfortunately, it's becoming a challenging environment at the moment, and that's a global situation.
Keith, the thing that yeah, I have to raise straight away, and it's the thing is I understand the loss of institutional wisdom that's occurs over the past 2.5 years that have now occurred. I mean, but it was something that had been occurring gradually anyway. There'd been a decline in the uptake of people taking on events security, nighttime economy roles. However, the one thing that sort of concerns me is the acceptance or the seeming acceptance, institutional wisdom acceptance that people, human beings, have forgotten how to behave as normal people. Because anyway, I don't know. Gary, have you got
Yeah,
anything
I
to
wouldn't. I
add?
wouldn't say
Sorry,
they've
I
forgotten to
know.
behave how is normal. I use the phrase exuberance. The
Yes.
party atmosphere. It's not a deliberate, malicious intent to cause harm. It's just a forgotten behavior that lack of realization that large crowds are very different to sort of what has been the norm for the past 2 or 3 years, which is small groups and gatherings. So, it's not malicious
Yeah.
intent by any means. It's an exuberance which becomes very difficult and challenging to manage because, they're not out to cause harm, but you have this, a behavior that needs to be reacquired, how to behave in large crowds, how to understand safety within large crowds. And if you look at the incident in South Korea, the incident at the Brixton O2, all of these can show characteristics of large crowds in an exuberant mood that have just not fully understood the environment that they're now faced with. For 2 years we've been in lockdown, and hey, all of a sudden events have started again, and everybody's out to enjoy themselves. And that's the fundamental challenge that we see here. I mean, Gary, you from the other side of it might
Well,
have a different perspective, but what's your view on that?
um, is a yes or no on that, Keith? To be honest with you, I mean, I go back to 2019 to a situation I was involved with, and the crowds. I find when crowds surge, um, everyone seems to go through the flow. Actually, they just keep going. They don't. They get lost, or they have one objective, and that objective is I want to get in there, or I'm going there. And as I say, I'll go back to 2019. I dealt with a very big situation which nearly lost control, but I think we grabbed control of it within sort of 15 to 20 minutes. But every person we were trying to pull back from the rear, their whole attitude was we still want to get in the front, but you can't get in the front because the front is now closed, and the people at the front are now pulling people out and moving them out and sending them away. But they're still trying to come round and do the same thing again. They become very narrow-minded and very, very literally tunnel vision. I am going there. I don't care what it is. And the people at the back don't realise the people at the front are being crushed or being pushed. The people at the front want to get out because they suddenly realise the situation. And then you've got to try and stop the next stage coming on behind them, who now think it's okay to keep pushing forward. Even on small queues, I had it the other week just before Christmas at a cloakroom, and I was standing there watching it. And again, it was the same situation, the crowd situation. We oversaw it, suddenly got the team in there, split the crowd straight in two. So you're right on the crowd dynamics has changed, but they're always there. And as you said, because of COVID lockdown, people have changed. Their attitudes have changed. They're a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah, sadly, we're seeing not just that, but also forgotten behavior on a large chunk of the industry that are now come back into the events. And of course, they're now dealing with crowds that are subtly different. So again, there's forgotten behavior both on the crowd side and also, reacquired behavior from the specialists like yourself who are now facing with a different type of crowd attitude. So, you need to adapt strategy and tactics and information systems accordingly. So it's very challenging, but the rate at which disasters are occurring, like as I said, O2 Brixton, South Korea, the incident in Uganda, all of these are large crowds which we run case studies in all of these for our training courses, all of which are reasonably foreseeable from a legal category. But people have just forgotten how to take those relevant precautions and not realized that the exuberance of the crowd is an additional force factor, a force multiplier, if you like, because everybody, as you say, wants to get to the front. And they've just forgotten what large crowd dynamics can be like. Now, we'll see this renormalize, but the danger is a sudden upsurge in major events. Sydney, London, Melbourne, just to name three that for this new year, where all of a sudden they become much more challenging than previous years in environments which had been deemed reasonably safely managed before. So you've got to look at why that's happening, and I think there's two factors: lost and reacquired skill sets within the industry, and this exuberance within the crowd itself.
Is the exuberance organised? One of the things that I've noticed, and in my previously on Ian Fox in lives, the one thing that I've noticed is there used to be a thing called steaming, and now it's stormtrooping, and now there are organised social media platforms which are deliberately organising these kind of events, or encourage them, promoting them. So how does, I mean, I was reading somewhere that I think the Brixton Arena normally had hardly any queue problems, and yet on this one event it was organised to a large degree. How do you deal with that as a crowd scientist?
We can't talk about specifics of
Yeah,
Brixton for obvious
yeah,
legal reasons. But again, one of the things that had always been noted is you need to be monitoring your social media channels to understand the level of potential malicious intent within the crowd. There will be a minority that are out there to cause harm, to create these sort of conflicts. We saw this at events, throughout the decades.
yeah,
Uh, it gets amplified through social media. It gets amplified because events have restarted. So, those are all part, I'm sure Gary will testify to this, those are all part of the crowd management planning. You need to think, well, how is this crowd changed? What is this environment likely? What is the intelligence we have from various social media channels about the likelihood of a potential incident or malicious intent? And then that's factored into the planning. So, I open this one to Gary now in terms of what is your comment in terms of organized malicious intent? Do you see that on the rise yourself?
Um, a lot of the venues I'm working at, we don't. But as a company, or what I do as a consultant, we do take on social media. We do look at it and we do analyze it. And for some of my clients, I won't name anything for the sake of it, but if it's a high risk kind of crowd, we will then discuss it. Even with local licensing, we'll come on board and discuss it with us, and then we'll take precautions to try and eliminate as much as we can. If not, we advise our clients not to take them on. But if these things are taken on, the advice is to person power up. Let's look at the risk assessments, what we put in play, and how can we determine things don't happen. And a lot of it we advise today is always about manpower as well, and what risk assessments and what planning can we put into play to prevent this. And that's probably the hardest thing. If your clients aren't doing that, or the event organisers aren't doing that, you're leaving yourself open for those type of risks.
Absolutely, and I can certainly testify that some of the expert witness cases that I've been involved in, when you have an authority that knows that they've got an undermanned event, that the risk assessment has been provided, and this goes USA as well as across Europe and Australia. If they've been advised that, you need more manpower, but decide to go ahead anyway, then of course that shifts from negligence very much into, I know I've got a significant risk, but I haven't done anything about it. And the case becomes that much more dramatic as it plays out in the various legal systems. So again, it's this. There are a lot of professionals, but there's always an organization out there that can get 0 hour contract and will bid for something at the lowest possible price, and that's always been the risk within the industry. Is at the professional events, and I'll give you an example. Following Astroworld disaster, I was involved in the task force in Texas. There, the Texas state had an investigation on it, and they had ream after ream of testimony of professional organizations about how they cater for risk. But that's never been the problem. The problem is it goes to the lowest bidder, and corners get cut as a consequence. And this is part of the danger within the industry, is that whereas professionals like yourself, very much aware of the risks, will advise to step away from something, there's always another company ready to step in and take it on at a lower bid. And unfortunately, I think it was one of the NASA astronauts just before a space shuttle took off said, "You realize we're sitting on top of a massive bomb that's gone to the lowest bidder?" And it's always that danger of, do you sacrifice professionalism and risk adjustment, risk management? I mean, we understand what the risks are, but how do we manage those risks? Or do you just go for the lowest bidder with it and try to maximize your profit? And that's always been the balance, because safety doesn't make money. It's a cost. And I always teach that it should be looked at as an insurance policy. You only ever need it if something goes wrong, in order to defend yourself in a court of law and demonstrate that an accident can happen, rather than as a consequence of negligence or lack of staff or lack of manpower. And sadly, the majority of cases that I deal with are falling under those categories: lowest bidder, cheapest possible option, and things go catastrophically wrong.
Do you think that,
sorry, did I just stop there?
Yeah, I just wanted it there because I just wanted to pick up on insurance, but rather than view it as insurance, but to see it as investment.
Oh yes, no. I think you're absolutely right. It is an investment, but it's seen as a cost with no return. You can't balance the books in terms of safety, so it's difficult to talk about it as an investment in the future. But it's easier to highlight it as, well, you take out a car insurance, and it costs you a lot of money, but when something does go wrong, it pays for itself. So it's always been a balance. It's an investment. If you don't cater for safety, when something goes wrong, you're facing bankruptcy, ruin, national headlines, loss of life. It's horrendous how badly it can affect any organization that's involved in litigation. And believe me, I mean, I've got 4 active cases at the moment. It's scary how much money gets involved in the legal system. But reputational damage, you look at the brand damage, look at the details for that. That's what whenever we're working with safety officers, how do I convince an organization that you spend the money? First, document the risks. Secondly, highlight to them that if you do not cater for this, I've documented it, and therefore the liabilities now are entirely on the bean counters. You've decided not to pay for it, but I've documented it thoroughly. And I know a number of cases I've been involved in where the safety organization, the team dealing with security, have documented a risk, and therefore that's their get out of jail free card. I've told you that there was a risk. You decided to go ahead anyway. You were perfectly aware of the liabilities that were attached to that. And I'm sure, Gary, you've had a very similar situation over the years where you've walked away from events because the organizer doesn't want to invest in the safety element. So what's your take on that view?
Well, as you say, is one of the biggest issues is things don't go wrong all the time. And that's what they look at. Can we get away with it this week? We've got away with it for the last maybe 2-3 years. But as you know, looking at Brixton and other things which happen around the world, only takes that one thing, and then bang, it's happened. It's all falling apart, and then they're looking at you going, well, what are you going to do about it? And like you said, I've put my paperwork in, I've shown you what we've done. You decided to do your own thing. You decided to cut corners. You decided to cut manpower down. You decided to bring staff in at these ridiculous times. Instead of bringing everyone in, briefing everybody, let's do a whole, get it done properly and professionally. We've got a tick box. Staff are all in correctly. Everything's in play. No, you want to cut corners because you want to save money. We're going to bring staff in 2 or 3 hours late, and then but by then, things have now happened. So yeah, it's a lot of things are down to promoters and event organisers. They want to cut corners because it is about profit.
Yeah.
Profit for people sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Totally agree with you. I mean, we use an example there. It's called a conditional bias, where I'm sure you've never done this. You know, it's illegal to drive while using a mobile phone. And the example we use is that I once saw a lecturer who, in effect, did the following. I've driven for 40 years with my hand using the mobile phone in my left hand, never had an accident. But the one time I used it in my right hand, I crashed the car. Therefore, driving with the phone in your left hand is safe, and driving with the phone in your right hand is dangerous. That's a conditional bias because they've never had an incident. They look to say, well, what we're doing is safe. You know, we got away with it last time. And unfortunately, most of the industry, the experiential learning is based on close calls, near misses, things that never get reported. But if you understand the science, the underlying level of risk, which I'm sure you do because you do your various risk assessments, risk management, risk mitigation, then you understand it doesn't matter which hand your phone's in, it's distracted driving which causes accidents. And you might get away with it for a dozen times, but it's that one time it goes wrong that the consequences are just utterly horrendous, like Brixton, like Seoul in Korea, you know, a nighttime economy that lost 160 odd lives, 156 lives. But you look at all the major disasters and they all have the same characteristics. It's worked up to the point in which it's failed, and then it's failed catastrophically. So it's this lack of awareness of the underlying principles of risk assessment, risk adjustment. And again, the inability for people like yourselves to convince the bean counters that this is an essential element. So I'm not saying that you're failing in the duty. We're all failing in the point of view that the promoters with the money have the final say. And there's no legislation in place that says an event must have a safety certificate to, you know, with professionals, with individuals that are qualified to sign off on it. We've got safety advisory groups, but of course they're advisory. And if you look around the world, not even those standards are being achieved. And I think that's a comment that I used from Hillsborough. Lord Justice Taylor said, you know, it's not enough to aim at the minimum measure necessary for safety. That has been, at the past, the approach used, and often not even those standards have been achieved. What's required is the vision and imagination for a new ethos. And that's really where we are, is that we're seeing a change in crowd behavior. We're seeing a loss in skill sets, but the promoters are still dealing with, you know, what's the maximum profit we can make out of this event? What's the minimum wage we can pay people? What's the 0-hour contract elements you can put into play? So we've become that voice in the wilderness saying, you know, you've got to take this into account. And unfortunately, with this exuberant behavior that we're seeing in crowds, we've seen, 3 close calls just on New Year's Eve alone. And with major events restarting and a skill shortage, it's not going to get better quickly until there's an attitude change for, you know, what is the cost of safety? What is the cost of regret?
Keith, can I just ask, just pick on something that you said there, because this, as far as reasonably practical, is yeah, and health and safety guidance, the word guidance being the operative descriptor there, I suppose, but they now have moved. I saw, and was a big part of me deciding to start guest safety officer lobby group to as low as reasonably possible, as practical, and we moved an awful lot. So that dynamic in how do you prepare, quantify, and plan for as low as reasonably possible to as far as is actually quite a vast gap within the legal settings.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very, very good question, because the as low as reasonably practical element there is about risk adjustment, risk management. The only safe event is when there are no performers, no crowds, and no staff. I mean, that's guaranteed to be crowd safe. Everything else is a spectrum. So from low, medium to high risk. And unfortunately, the tools that we've got in terms of your likelihood and consequence is too crude to explain anything that's dynamic in nature, that has a behavioral element, that the crowds might be influenced by the sudden change in weather or a loud noise or a pyrotechnic going off in the wrong space. So we don't have, or really that's what my work is to try to create a set of tools that allow the layperson to understand crowd risks in the context of if it looks like this, then you need to avoid those spaces. So as you know, we launched an app to just try and create a public awareness of high density crowds because until you're caught in it, the question I was asked after Itaewon, in fact, I'm asked after every disaster, how do you avoid a crowd crush? Well, once you're caught in it, there's very little you can do. What you can do is be situationally aware and realize that high density crowds are things you can avoid getting into. And I think, we've got two elements. One, the legislation, the guidance doesn't really go far enough. The tools aren't wholly appropriate unless they're used by experts like Gary, for instance, who will totally understand that likelihood and consequence is one metric in terms of understanding crowd risks. But also, of course, the crowd behavior is that people just don't know the level of risks they're stepping into. They assume when they're walking through an environment that someone else is looking after their safety. And there's a level of assumption on that point, which makes something like Itaewon, if the public were aware, whoa, this looks a bit too dense, I shouldn't go in there. I shouldn't expose myself to that harm. So there are three sort of elements to it. First of all is the promoter and the value that they attach to safety. Second is the professionalism that's always the voice in the wilderness of trying to get those additional claims. And third is the risk awareness of the public themselves. So, if you can address those issues as we're trying to do, with various apps and education programs, then my view is that the more we make people aware of the risks involved in crowds, then the more that people will be able to take the relevant precautions. Now, I didn't preach to the converted. Gary, you've been practicing this for years, so you'll fully understand what I'm saying. But it is an uphill battle nearly every event that you'll be working at, yeah?
I fully agree with that, but one point I think you missed out on there as well is staff training. Staff training is the underpin of everything. I mean, the security side. I mean, I know we do the crowd management training and for stewards and bits and pieces, but hands-on proper training in dealing with these situations, it's not covered in the training at all. Until you've actually been there and you realise what you're facing, it's a different monster, and it becomes a monster because it becomes dangerous. And that is a big issue out there, and especially there's a new generation of security officers coming through. They've got no idea what they're stepping into in these environments, whether it's an event, a festival. When that crowd is moving fast and furious, you've either got to get out or someone's got to be analysing that and watching it, trying to prevent that happening. Yeah. And that's probably, for someone like myself, I'm experienced, but there's a lot of inexperienced managers out there who don't know this stuff. They think they do, but then if you haven't got the manpower out on the ground to deal with that as well, inexperienced manpower, again, this is how things start to roll downhill rapidly.
I think...
So I just wanted to think, because I did tell you about this, because I've got to say, when I was at the Lincoln Market and I was doing some quality assurance stuff there, 18 stone, 6'1", and the next thing I knew, I got myself caught in a pinch point, and there was nothing I could do. Nothing. I was just almost off the ground, and it was frightening. And I've been in the army, seen a few things, but that was really scary because I was completely out of control. Is this something you understand, Keith, with what you've done?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing is that I think I totally agree with Gary's opinion there. And unless you've got the experience of managing something live, you don't know just exactly how you'll be able to handle any kind of crisis management. And there are on-the-job training schemes that can operate for that, but they're not professionalized. Where you've talked about it is there's an underlying theory of where pressure points can build up and how to balance systems. So I always say that I could take an experienced crowd manager, somebody that's got experience of being in a crowd, managing a crowd, and give them the underlying theory that will make them a much better, more proficient planner, manager of crowds. But I can't just give somebody theory and expect them to go out and deal with a situation because, as Gary has rightly pointed out, unless you're faced with the dynamics of things and the information that's coming at you and the visuals that you're trying to deal with and can process that. So, a good crowd manager is able to process that information and come up with some underlying strategies. So you need the theory, but you also need a level of experience to come into play. And one doesn't work without the other. An experienced crowd manager with a good theoretical background, I think, becomes a very proficient, and they're like hen's teeth. They're the ones that command the high consultancy rates. But, as Gary's rightly pointed out, if you're faced with a situation, as you've just highlighted, Ian, there's nothing you can do once you're caught in a crowd crash. You need to prevent it happening. That's where the theory comes into play. And if something does go off kilter or out of plan, then that's where your experiential learning really comes into set. And you need both. There's got to be a balance between both of those. And I think there's too many experienced crowd managers out there trying to teach their conditional biased theories about I've never had an accident, therefore I know what I'm doing, without actually underlying concepts of crowd physics, crowd dynamics, crowd psychology, and crowd behavior. So it's got to be a balanced equation that tackles both of those end of things.
What do you think, Gary?
I fully agree with that. It's got to be a balanced behaviour. Without experience and training, it's not worth. It's like putting a police officer out on the ground without training. It's the same thing, and that's the whole principle about crowd management. It's being able to see those risks and deal with them and have the manpower. Again, it's going back to, as Keith says, the bean counters. They're putting the money on the ground. You've got the facilities and resources, which we don't tend to have in the private security industry. This is where things go wrong. But if you've got the resources, you're being paid the correct money, you've got the skill set there, you can avert many of these things.
Yep, totally agree.
I think you're right. Keith, I don't suppose you've got anything you could show us. I'd certainly love to see your app. I've seen it. I don't know if you can get it going or not. It'd be great.
I probably can.
Wow.
Let's see if I can do this. I think there's a way of casting my screen to the Mac, which I can do there. I need to do screen share. And I think
Let's see if
plugin the plugin's required. It's downloading something, but I'm on a Mac, so that's reasonably fast. Okay, so I'm on screen share, iMac.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got to do it on Zoom iMac. So, do we have anything going there? Does that work for you?
No.
Oh, okay.
That's the simple one.
Well, I can resort to the PowerPoint that we prepared rather than do a live demonstration.
Okay.
I have, yeah,
Because I just loved. It's a shame you can't, because I absolutely loved the bit where you're all walking down the street, tied up with a rope.
Oh yeah, I mean that was a lot of fun to demonstrate. So I think you can see screen share there. Is that working for you?
Yeah, I can see that now. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got an online program that actually shows the app. Basically, I've done a lot of work around the world. I'm not going to bore you with reading through my various qualifications and that. That's just for people that have never seen this before. And so understanding disasters, Hillsborough, Love Parade, and then the incident at Turin, Astroworld, Seoul, Korea, and the Birmingham Brixton incident. So we've got some basic overviews of crowd disasters and causality. The app itself looks like that. It runs on Android and iOS, and basically is an opening screen. The principle here was to teach people what crowd density looks like, both for moving and static crowds, to be able to report from the field what you see, and to send that to either control rooms or just to record information. Trouble is, we often see, Gary, as I'm sure you're aware, you get TikTok clips with commentary on it, which are not available to the control room. What we thought was that is it possible to teach people about crowd density and to actually access any mobile phone device to a control room so that your staff are saying this is what the crowd looks like from this position. So it's geotagged, time stamped, and now you've got a clean recording that gives you a force multiplier. So instead of having CCTV cameras everywhere, you've got your staff with mobile phones. So the first element of it is just to say 1 to 2 people per square meter, low risk, 3 to 4, be aware, 5, avoid. So crowd density in controlled environments. So we've got a teaching element to it. We've got that bit with the crowd flow. And this is an experiment we did just after Love Parade where I had a 1 meter circle of string and we put 2 people in it and had them walk up and down, timed them to walk 10 meters. And as we put more and more people in the string, of course, we could demonstrate that it got a little bit more difficult to record. So as I'm sure you're aware, Gary, when people are reporting crowds from the ground, they're using a rather indescript language like it's heaving, it's packed, it's crowded, it's congested, it's crushed. We tend to just talk about crowd flow as it's free flowing, its capacity, or congested. Those are your 3 conditions you need to understand. 1 to 2 people per square meter, low risk, 3 to 4, amber, and then 5+ red. And you make your decisions before it reaches red. So again, within the app, just what is the simplest way to describe crowds to the control room so that you can make your decisions? So the guy on the ground is seeing it at ground level, but the person in the control room will see a different perspective. We've actually got a training course that we wrote in traditional Chinese for the Hong Kong Jockey Club so that the control room staff could see what the ground staff were looking at, but could see it from a different perspective. So again, just trying to define the words that are said in there. And then there's an assessment section. What density are you seeing in that video? And it tells you the correct answer. So you can just assess yourself. And then finally, in the report section, all the video modes allow you to do high density. So I've created this high density crowds with full-size videos for training exercises. And I know there's been a couple of control room operators saying that this is what it looks like from different angles. So that we can see the crowd from different angles. We can then pick the density that we think we're seeing from that. And now you've got evidence gathering and risk awareness. Record that crowd. So a short video clip, and then WhatsApp it straight to the control room. So you've got information in the control room that's a force multiplier from all the people on the ground. Plus, it's geotagged. You've got all the information that you can now record as evidence gathering. So whether you're a police officer or whether you're a control room or whether you've got an idea of an early build-up in crowd density, or for things like suspect packages, trip hazards, suspicious person, take a short video image and send it to the control room. Imagine if the MEN Arena, instead of trying to find a radio and describe what a person looks like and their location, which takes time, just take a photograph or an image of it and send it through to the control room. This guy's in that corner, he's looking odd. And now I've got a video image in the control room where I can start processing that. So again, just bits and bobs of information that we thought, what can we do that can make the public aware of the same level of risks that control room needs to be aware of? And it's all this balance of safety, security, throughput, cost. So basically that's a very quick runaround of the app. It's 89 pence on the App Store. And I think we've just got a new version coming out today. So we're constantly updating it. I've had a lot of inquiries from, can you put an Indian crowd in there? Because they're a slightly smaller body frame. Can you put people with luggage for airport environments? What does density looks like in those environments? Can we also include things like family groups when people are moving as clusters? So all of this really is just a sort of public awareness element. But in the control room, of course, it's a false force multiplier. If you're sitting in a control room and you're getting information from the guy on the ground, it's looking a bit dangerous here. But instead of him having to try and describe it, he's just sent you a video image, and he's already been trained what crowd density looks like. So again, it's just information gathering. But I'm sure any comment you've got there, Gary, we're always looking for feedback about how useful this would be in a control room environment on the early build-up of crowd density.
I'm quite impressed by that, to be honest with you. If I'd known about it a few years ago, I would have definitely be using this.
We only launched it about 3 months ago, so
Yeah, I could have done with that about last year, several years ago, because that would have been a brilliant piece of kit. It looks a brilliant piece of kit. What I will be doing though is I will be downloading it, and I will be using it for the guys, and I'll test it out and see how it goes over the next few weeks at venues, because I think that is a really good piece of kit. If it's throwing that information out all the time, and again, I'm big for geotagging and live information, because at the end of the day, it's no worse when someone knocks on my door and they tries to blame you for something you haven't done.
yeah. Again, for evidence gathering, we can see the crowd build up, and now I've got a record of that.
Yeah.
I've worked in control rooms as tactical advisors, and I mean, you've often seen this situation of, oh, it looks heaving down there, and then you're all focusing on the video. Was that busier than last year? What am I comparing it to? So again, just to try to give people visual information. We've got another tool that we give away on the course, allows you to build crowds of up to about 1 million people in complex spaces where I can look at it from any angle. So when it looks like this, I shut the gates. It's all about visual information in the control room. Because as you know, you're processing videos that are live and dynamic, but you need a reference point. So our aim here was to try and create as many of these tools as possible to aid decision making. At what point should I be shutting the gates? So, we run training courses, we've got apps, we've got various, we've got this PC app that we give it away for free. Software that allows me to model very large and complex sites with infrastructure in place so that you can see it from multiple angles and say, this is too dense, this is safe, and this is something we should be monitoring. So very simple. Green, okay, we're fine up to about 50% of our capacity. Amber, we should be getting ready, and we lock down before it gets red. So we're locking down sites at 80%, make our decisions as to whether or not we should let more people in or not. But when we planned the royal wedding in 2011, we did the site analysis. We said, when it looks like this, you divert everybody to Hyde Park. There's going to be people ignoring it. There's going to be people that are not going to notice it. There's people that are already on the way. But what we need to do is lock it down before it gets overcrowded. And, just giving people that level of information here was the whole aim of trying to create more public awareness of crowd density and crowd risks. So, that's our bit. That's what we're doing. But 89 pence.
I want a refund. It cost me I paid £1.19 for mine.
Oh my God! Oh no, you bought the Android version, and they don't have a 99 pence. That was the cheapest price we could put it on Android because they've got various tax elements. Yeah. I couldn't get it cheaper than £1 on Android. So have a word with the Google Store and say, why can't we get an 89 pence version on it?
But what I would like to say is that I actually did it, went through it, and you're quite right. A few goes through, and you can see the difference very, very easily. And so for me, as somebody who was potentially working on the ground, then that would be a great piece of kit to have for your staff, for yourself. It's the kind of thing that may be useful in schools. Who knows, to bring in. But the one thing I was going to just say on that, I ran a company, Keith, and if I could have had something like that, then I'd have made sure that all my chaps had it, definitely, and chapesses, because
yeah, as I said, it's ubiquitous. We've got these devices all the time. What can we do with them that can assist the control room to have eyes at all levels? I think that's one of the reasons we drove at this. One was knowing at what point you should shut the gates and not allow more people in. Two is identifying anything that looks suspicious so that you can send an image through the control room rather than try to find a mobile signal or a radio and then trying to describe it in words. All of that takes time. Geotagging it with things like what 3 words or GPS locations and evidence gathering. Because after the event, the one thing that people fail to realize, the control room doesn't necessarily have the same sort of access to WhatsApp groups and social media that the people in the crowd do. So could we somehow enhance that And you use these devices to give the control room that ground level view. Again, just to augment professionals like Gary, who's probably fully aware of this, and this just adds to their information systems, into the risk management. So I mean, it was aimed at the professional, but also aimed at the crowd to say, when it looks like this, maybe you should think about going into that area. It's just too crowded already.
Is so I'm going to just, because it's as you can see, I have loads of questions. That's the kind of guy I am. Yeah. But one of the key things that I've picked up from this conversation, this app, having read far too many reports on various disasters, etc., is there is a constant theme: communication and the breakdown of. Would this? Well, I think this would be a brilliant thing. But is there anything else that you see as being a way forward to help and assist?
Yeah, I think the communication protocol, Gary, I'm sure you would equally comment on this one. Using the right words, the vocabulary, training people to communicate. I've heard somebody say, well, I use three clips from our local newspaper. One where it said it's packed, another one said it's crowded, the other one said it was a sea of people, all describing the same density at a local event in Kendal. And that language, that vocabulary doesn't help the control room make decisions. One person, it's crushed down here, might mean it's a bit busy, whereas to me, it's imminent risk of death. And the vocabulary, the language needs to be much more precise, which is why we spend a lot of effort thinking about, red, amber, green, describing crowd flow, just using three distinct words, so that everybody knows what page they're singing from. The same hymn sheet. Trying to get everybody on that same thinking line. So Gary, I mean, you probably got a lot you could comment on this one as well.
Again, I mean, it's all pulling down to that training to understand people, educating people, not for staff and people, educating that side. And I mean, looking at your app, it's brilliant. It simplifies it. But as I say, is that communication between staff, managers, not just the security staff, but is the production team, the event production, the owners of the venues. They need to be aware of what you're saying. As you said, someone's saying crushing, and they're like someone's trodden their toe because there's two or three people in an area. But as you say, is the flow free? Is it free flowing? Is it not free flowing? All those little things. I mean, I see this every weekend at different venues we work at, and some places got staircases, some implement stuff in there, and I'm moving staff around and I'm putting things in place. But is that communication from the staff to the control room or to the head of security, even down to the event manager, understanding what is going on? And that's the most important thing.
Very good point. I mean, we've, as I said, we had this request from the Hong Kong Jockey Club. They didn't want any contracted or casual staff to enter the site unless they had basic risk awareness and risk communication skills. And what they've done, in fact, they sent me through a new batch this morning. They've taken photographs around an empty site, and I can superimpose crowds of different density in it and say, when it looks like this, what do you say to your supervisor as an assessed course? And they're not allowing anybody to work the site unless they've got that basic risk communication skills. So it could be a trip hazard. You see this, a cable lying in the wrong place. What do you do about it? You don't phone your supervisor. You get in front of it. You make sure you move it out of the way so that nobody trips over the damn things. Basic risk awareness, I think, at a fundamental level. But, making it site-specific was the element that we loved. Is, again, the phone. The guy just walks around, takes photographs of his site at eye level, and now I can superimpose risks into that and turn it into a site-specific training course. So generic risk awareness, risk communication, but now here are images from your site. This is what you should see when you're in that area. And if you see that, this is what you should do. So, a basic 1 hour risk awareness, risk training course, and coupled with a control room version. If somebody in the ground reports that, what do you do about it? So, so we did this in traditional Chinese for the Hong Kong Jockey Club. So this morning, 3rd of January, they sent me through both of their sites, a whole new batch of photographs. Can I put risks into those and load it up onto their training programs so that, again, annual renewable training. Nobody gets to work their site unless they've passed this sort of site-specific certified course.
Is annual enough in most training, or do you think it should be? It's not so much. I suppose what I'm saying is, yes, we need to do training and refresher training, but there seems to be this tick box approach that, oh, we did it for a year, last year, or we don't have to do this training now for 3 years, you know.
I know you're absolutely right. Annual was the first batch, but they sent through this morning and said we need to do this every month. Yeah,
Yeah,
this
right.
needs to be a refresher so that people need to every month go on and see a new set of photographs, a new set of images. So they've just asked me to requote for this to be a far more frequent assessment. And again, it's once you've done a sort of online multiple choice assessment, people will find ways of cheating that or screen grabbing the answers. So by constantly refreshing the site images, so that they're seeing a new batch of site images every month. How much is that going to cost? How do we implement that? And again, these are for two very big sites. The Hong Kong Jockey Club, they've got Sha Tin and Happy Valley, so they're fixed sites, and they just don't want any contractor or casual staff to come on there. We're doing a presentation in 5 days now, out in the States for the American amusement industry. Similar thing. What do we do about risk? How do we recognize crowd behavior? How do we make sure that we can keep our environment safe? So, those are the big amusement parks. Because again, they're seeing the same sort of thing. People are coming back to events in larger numbers with this exuberant behavior.
I see, but it's all so interesting. I mean, Gary, what do you think about that?
Oh,
Can you speak Chinese?
I can't. Apart from me, how I think that's hello. There you go. That's my chance. But going on the point of the training side, I mean, training is so important. It's one of my biggest complaints in our industry. These medical training 3 years. I have to do my control and restraint training every year, refresher. But the average guard does it once and doesn't have to do it again. All this stuff is training, training, training. The police officer trains, but let's move them out of the way a little bit. But let's look at the military side. You train for the worst. You train, 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 train. But when that day, if it does go wrong, you're ready for it. And if you're fully trained, you're putting all your CPD in, and not just going online. Online training is online. It's as Keith says, it's easy to screen grab. It's easy to cut corners. It's damn easy. It's hands-on training, and that's one thing we don't do in our industry. We don't do enough proper hands-on training and going to places, or there isn't enough facilities to do this kind of training. And I'm going to throw the SIA into it for a minute bit. They are the regulator. They have a minimum standard, and they expect everyone to go out their way and do it. I think it's about time we got rid of the minimum standard and up the standards, because if we've got good people on the ground who are training regularly every month, every 6 months, we're going to achieve better results. We're going to have better safety, better skilled people on the ground, better paid people on the ground, and hopefully these type of events will be less and less because we've got better skilled people doing the job.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally agree with that.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think I'll be the lady on this one. Have you got any sort of final thoughts, Keith? Have I missed anything? Because it's really important, as far as I'm concerned. This is the whole point of doing this, is that we can help people be more professional. Then they can protect people. We can actually save lives, rather than what I'm sick and tired of seeing is people going, oh well, yeah, let's have an inquiry. At which point we'll turn around and say, the mistakes were made. This should never have happened. Steps have been put in place. It's a tired cliche now. Let's see affirmative action, positive action that enables us to actually save lives, not just talk about it.
Yeah, I think, as Gary's just stated, you need both the classroom theory. It's like a driving test. They wouldn't allow you to get in front of a vehicle unless you pass the theory and the practical. And, you need both of these elements into play. I think, once you've done the practical element, the theory will make you a better crowd manager. It's just the same as the theoretical test you do in a car. But the safety related industry, it's crowd management is unlike any other industry. You consider something like aviation. There's a near miss or a close call, like the incident down in Gold Coast. A
Yeah.
team of professionals will go in, investigate it, and a new process procedure will be put in, and that will then become your new requirement. Something happens in a crowd-related incident, there's an inquiry, it doesn't really result in anything, the changes don't get made, and all of those near misses and close calls never get reported. So the
Yeah.
industry itself tends to keep its knowledge of near misses compartmentalized, whereas every other safety related industry, a near miss or a close call or an incident, has a team of professionals going in, evaluating what went wrong, why it went wrong, and putting in a legislative procedure. So aviation being the prime example of that, and this Gold Coast incident with a helicopter collision that happened just yesterday. So I think we need legislation as well as professionalizing the understanding of accidents and incidents, because the criminal cases are few and far between. The civil cases all get buried. It'll take years for a civil case to come to
Yeah.
to court, and none of that information reaches the public domain. So the industry doesn't learn from it the same way as aviation does. So Gary, you want the final word on this one?
Well, I think you've summed it up there, Keith. But one thing I would like to ask before we do disappear: what's the name of your app for everybody?
Oh, crowd risk awareness.
Crowd risk awareness. Great stuff.
It says what it does in the tin, yeah.
Great stuff. Yeah, but as I say, covering all the points, we do need legislation. These near misses do need to be recorded. I've worked in many places where these near misses, they go under the carpet. Well, we're lucky to get away with that. So, but yeah, we should have something set up, and at the end of the day, it is crowd safety. When these people come out to have fun at these venues, these events, that they want to know they are safe, and they go home safe. They've had a great time, and knowing that there are professionals out there doing the correct job.
Excellent.
Right, gents, we've had the hour, and more. So, superstar crowd scientist, my apologies, Professor Keith Still, and now we know fluent traditional Chinese speaker.
Oh no,
and
it
you.
was all translated for us. I didn't,
Oh, don't ruin it, Gary. Sorry,
no.
don't ruin it, Keith.
I'll make no illusions about languages there. Now we have professionals do that with us, so it helps.
So you've taken the shine off it a bit. But thank you anyway. Gary, obviously, and I will speak again in a few minutes. But I just wanted to personally say thank you very much. It's really nice that you've taken the time to give us your support to try and get a message out there. The link will be up on the YouTube site when I post that later today. So Keith, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite. A great way to start the new year.
It most certainly is. Right, I'm going to leave you two both now, and I'll switch off and end things, and I'll speak to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye then.
Right then, boys and girls, there we go. It was a very, very interesting discussion. I learned a lot. I hope you did. And most importantly, we've got an app that we can now download, and that link will be on YouTube in the next day. It may be sooner, who knows? And we can make sure that we actually do more to professionalize this industry, not just for the benefit of the public, but for everybody involved in this sector, because we need to work together if we're going to succeed and save lives. Thank you very much for your time, and remember, we're doing everything that we can to keep you out of jail. Speak soon.